Hello everybody, my name is Otis, and my story is about my body. Or rather, about the fact that I have a certain ability. It's very unusual, and you may think it's even strange. But I have it, and I live with it. For as long as I can remember, I have always been hypersensitive. Ever since I was a child, I felt pain in my body. When someone had a headache nearby, or if somebody had a bad stomachache or a sore throat, I could feel it on myself. Yes, it was hard, and my mother worried a lot at first, and the medics were giving me a handshake. Sometimes there were even times when I could bend over in pain if we were standing in line for a burger. That meant someone had a stomach problem. Only, I didn't realize it right away. We got some help. I remember how, purely by chance, my mother and I went to take our things to the laundromat, where we had to sit and wait for a while. At first, everything was normal. I was sitting on the phone, and then I began to have trouble breathing. I was covered with sweat. A strong cramp clutched my heart. As soon as I turned my head, I noticed my grandfather sitting next to me, holding onto his heart and slowly falling down. My mother ran up to me, all frightened, holding my face and asking me what was going on, and I just pointed my eyes at my grandfather. "Ambulance! Somebody call an ambulance!" When the paramedics arrived, it was already too late. The old man was dead. Everyone present, including me, felt uncomfortable. When the paramedics asked me what had happened, I described what I felt. "Did you feel it again?" "Yes." "Oh my God, my poor baby boy."
"Who are you, grandson?"
"No, we don't know him. It's just that my son saw everything."
"Ah, it looks like a heart attack."
They took the old man away, and my mum took me home. After that, she almost went crazy. Mum started looking for answers to her question, not in science, but in something more unexplainable, and she found it. An unfamiliar grandmother came to our house. She turned out to be the wife of that dead old man. We never found out how she found us, but that wasn't the point. Grandma looked very tired and sad.
"We had lived with him all our lives. I knew all his ills, and I knew how to help. That morning we decided to take the laundry to the wash, because I wanted to sleep some more. I tried to go with him, but he told me to rest."
And then she started crying a lot. My mother and I were confused, and my grandmother continued.
"If I had gone with him that day, if I had been around."
Suddenly I felt something squeeze inside me. My head hurt like hell. I wanted to hand her a glass of water, and I dropped it from my hands. It shattered. Mum immediately ran up to me. "What's wrong with you? What happened?" My head! Mum immediately understood everything. She gave that grandmother a sedative and a pill for her headache. She drank it, and after a while, she felt better. And then she suddenly asked,
"Is your son like that too?"
"Like what?"
"Like me. He feels and mirrors everything."
"What do you mean?"
"Your son has a gift. He feels other people's illnesses."
"And how do you know?"
"I can see it in him. I came here for a reason. I felt something. I had a dream. Don't be scared. It's just a gift. Use it right."
And then the grandma left. My mother and I had no idea what to do with it or how else it could be used. But after a few years, when I got used to it and began to differentiate the area of pain, I began to react instantly to the soreness of family members. As soon as someone got sick, I could immediately identify what and where. Yes, I felt a lot of discomfort. You can't imagine the agony I felt sometimes. During this time, I began to talk to my grandmother more and more often, and she taught me how to put blocks and disable my abilities when I needed them so it would not harm me. A few more years later, I went to medical school to study pediatrics. It made sense because while adults can describe their symptoms, children cannot. So I decided that I would become their interpreter in a more comprehensible language. In the second year, we started practicing. I remember it was my first trip to the ER. Some hysterical woman called and asked me to come. She said that her child was half conscious and had severe seizures. We immediately went there with a group of experienced paramedics. No one knew about my gift, nor did I tell them. As soon as we entered their house, I turned on the ability and felt, "He's got a kidney problem. We should do an ultrasound and take some urine for analysis."
"Yeah, clever like that, huh?"
"He's never had a kidney problem, never." "I'm telling you, he's cramping because of the severe spasms."
"We'll figure it out without your advice. I'm sorry, he's new here, so he's showing off."
The child began to choke. My pain also increased, so I got some medicine from the medicine cabinet and quickly gave him an intramuscular injection. At first, everyone was screaming, especially his mother, but then after a while, the boy woke up. He began to feel better. His mother rushed to him and asked where he was in pain, and he pointed to his kidneys. We immediately took them by ambulance and took them to the hospital, where the baby was diagnosed. His kidneys were really bad, and they found a lot of stones there as well. His mother was sitting in the hallway crying, and when she saw me, she threw him on her knees and started thanking me. It was nothing. Get well. From that moment on, I was looked at the hospital like a mummy. I seemed to be, but that made them feel uncomfortable. They nicknamed me the walking CT scanner. It was funny, but really. Since then, there have been many times when there was no time to do the examination. Then they dragged me all over the departments. That year, our hospital became the most popular, and we saved 40% more lives than usual. I was quickly hired. My career skyrocketed, and I started making 3 times as much as my parents combined in a quarter. They were very proud of me, and they made one rule at home. Whatever was going on at work, I came home to rest, and my mum would tell me to turn off my abilities so I could relax, eat good food, and sleep. My gifts were also never told to anyone. We preferred to keep it quiet, for my safety. And to the others, I just told them that I was feeling something. No details. It was enough time for me to become a bit of a star. Thanks to money and popularity in my circles, I was often away from home. I either had a job or a party. At home, I was relieved of all the things I had to do. Of course, I didn't forget about my family. We bought a bigger house. I upgraded my father's car. Everybody was happy. But as it usually happens, I began to withdraw more and more. Mum began to arrange dinners together more often, inviting me, but I refused. No, Mum, sorry, today is the birthday of a colleague. I'll go there. But you just went yesterday. Well, we have a big staff, so I have to go, you know? Yeah, it's okay. It's just me and Dad, but if you want to come, I'll be happy to see you. We don't see much of you lately. Yeah, but I'm earning too. I understand, son. I'm not bothering you. I just miss you. All right, Mum, look, I gotta run. I'll talk to you later, okay? I hung up. We were having a good time. And in the middle of it, my mum called me. I hung up because I thought she was calling me again to ask me to come over. Mum again? Yep, made dinner, waiting, even though I said I wasn't coming. It happens. We're doctors. We have everything for the people, but not for the family. I bought them a house and car. When you have everything, people think more in terms of spirituality. You're right. Well, I'll have dinner tomorrow. Another colleague came running up to me and says, Austin, your mother! They took her to the nearest hospital. She'd had a stroke. She went into a coma. My dad sat next to me in the hallway upset, and I was so angry with myself. She was having dinner with me, and then she suddenly grabbed her head. Did she often have headaches? Yes, very often lately. Why didn't you tell me? You know, Mum wanted you to rest at home. You work too much already. You're tired. So what? She may not come out of her coma now. We tried not to disturb you. I cried. I'm sorry, Father. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. When I could do that, I helped everyone except you. I'm sorry. Dad just hugged me tightly, and then the doctor came out. He said her condition was bad, but they would try to do everything they could. They finally let me in there, and I got a feel for Mum. Her head hurt like crazy, but the hemorrhage was small. My dad called an ambulance in time. 2 weeks later, Mum came to her senses, and I took her under personal observation. We were lucky. She survived the difficult operation. Now I've considered everything, and I'm certainly not letting her or my dad out of my sight anymore.
Hi everyone, my name is Warren. I've always wanted to be a superhero because I've been interested in them almost all my life. It seemed to me that the life of superheroes is perfect. It has everything you need from fame to good deeds. I thought that if I ever became like them, my life would be better. Now let's go back a little. I was born and raised in a poor family. My father worked as a taxi driver and my mother as a cook. We lived happily though. We were a little short of money. My dad, in addition to his main job, often worked as a fisherman on weekends, but he worked at the port and took me with him. I just loved standing next to him and looking at the water. The only but, I was terribly sorry for the fish. I once asked my father if he felt sorry for the fish. He said that he hated his second job just because he saw the fish die. I wondered why he was working there. He said there was a need for money. I was sad that he was in such a position that sometimes our needs push us to do things that we don't like. Dad worked there until the last day, when he got sick. Unfortunately, the common flu, as we thought, turned out to be an evil disease. He got cancer. It's hard to see your loved one die every day, but life is like this, my mother reassured me. After my father died, we started living together, and I kept thinking about these fish and Dad's desire not to harm them. In addition, I was very fond of superheroes, as I have already told you. So one day I woke up thinking, why don't I really become that kind super person who could protect Pisces? I thought for a long time about how to do this, and it dawned on me. After watching documentaries about whales, sharks, and dolphins, I learned that some of them are washed up on the beach and die by the hundreds. I felt so sorry for them. I just imagined that one of them is someone's father. On the anniversary of death, I went to the port where my father worked. I wanted to remember him and how he fished, pulling tons of fish to the shore. And when the fishermen pulled the net again, I jumped into the water and tried to cut the net with a knife, but I didn't succeed. Of course, I was quickly pulled out and taken home wet. My terrified mother apologized in tears for my behavior, and then punished me by putting me under house arrest for 2 weeks. During this time, I often sat on the internet and read articles about fish. Then, for the first time, I became interested in the structure of their bodies. Most of all, attracted by the presence of gills, thanks to which underwater inhabitants breathe in the water. If only I had the same ones, I thought dreamily. A few weeks after I heard the news about the next release of Whales on the Water, which has grieved me to the heart, I ran to the place, even though it was not close to home, and seeing the picture live made me even more terrified. I just stood there and cried, touching the sea giants, and I realized that it was time to act. I ran home and bought fish oil on the way, and I ate 5 pills a day, naively thinking that it would help me turn into fish. Then I found a suit on the internet that looked like scales. I begged my mother to enroll me in the pool to learn how to dive and hold my breath underwater. My mother bought me fins, glasses, and a tube that allowed me to breathe underwater, but it didn't allow me to dive as deep as I wanted. Then I thought about the need for gills, but I didn't know how to implant them in my body. After searching through a lot of literature in the library, reading a lot of information about gills, I literally became sick of becoming a fishman. For some, it was disgusting, because many were confused by the smell of the inhabitants, tails, and even eyes, but they were pleasant to me, if only because people have not yet learned to live underwater like them. It's delicious. I made gills out of the tools I had at hand, like fish. It was something similar. For the material, I used real fish gills that my mother prepared for dinner. I've never eaten it, by the way. I stuck the needlework with the plaster on the skin under the ribs and believed that they would work in the water, just needed to check. So when I finally learned to swim, bought everything I needed for a suit, I ran to the beach when there were huge waves. I was sure that my friends would be thrown out on the sand again that day. I just sat and waited, just as the terrible weather started. A cold rainstorm began. I was chilled to the bone. I didn't give up and believed that I was the real superhero. After sitting for a couple of hours, I saw one small fish washed up on the beach. I ran quickly to her, took her in my cold hands, and threw her back into the water. At that moment, I felt magical. My heart was beating with good deeds. So I sat down very close to the water to wait for the next wave. But the other one was huge, like a wall running toward me. I looked up and noticed too late that it was too big. Without calculating my strength, I ran away from her, but I didn't have time. I was swept into the water and I became entangled in a circle, lost where the earth is and where the sky is. I tried desperately to get air, but my strength was failing. I realized that the water is much stronger and I cannot cope with it. All I felt then was fear. I remembered my mother and suddenly my father came to me. Yes, he was right next to me, holding my hand and trying to find a way out. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't, and as if in my mind, I asked him to help me. At that moment, I saw a gap and came up to it. I managed to take a big breath of air and the second wave took the body under the water again. My dad was pulling me up, and I tried to swim after him. I don't know how long it lasted, but eventually, when I opened my eyes, I suddenly started coughing violently. And a man was sitting over me and helped me roll over on my side. The water came out of me. It was terribly painful, like my lungs were burning. I began to breathe as I had the first time, and the stranger called for help. Of course, then the ambulance arrived and I was taken to the hospital. My mother arrived there. She was terrified. I confessed everything honestly, for which I received from my mother. My action was called brave, but poorly thought out and risky. I realized that I probably wasn't ready to fight nature yet. I wrote a post about myself on the web. I didn't want to feel sorry for myself. I just wanted people like me not to make mistakes, at the cost of life. News of me spread quickly. The next day, I really woke up popular. The journalists called me Fishman, just what I wanted. But this did not make me happy, since all my work went to the trash. When I recovered, I went on the mend. We came to visit one person. Turns out she worked for a Greenpeace organization that needed volunteers like me. With my mother's permission, she told me about safe ways to solve the problem of poaching with fish, and not only with them. Then I realized it was mine. After listening carefully to the representative, my mother agreed to my free training. So I still became a superhero. Of course, not like in science fiction movies. Unfortunately, this only happens in movies. But I was not upset, because we did really good things and still remained alive and unharmed. And then I realized that there are heroes among us, ordinary people. You just need to look closely.